Presentation, I will be giving outlines of my experience while we as a group were working in the earthquake area, which started in 2005. Since this seminar is dedicated to the natural disasters, the other two, and the second natural disaster which we have encountered is the flood 2010, and I'll give just brief information about the flood as well, which gives a very clear message that how absolutely different the earthquake is from the flood as it is considered towards the nature of the human suffering. The third in my area is obviously terrorism, and the fourth is traffic, both railways and road traffic. But I will confine myself to the first two natural disasters and give data about amputations and other injuries of the earthquake. Thank you very much. I start. I understand that today in the morning session and this session, the whole philosophy of disaster has been explained, and it will be a very humble attempt if I repeat those principles. But one thing that still in our countries, this is considered to be a bad star or bad luck, as the word disaster was conceived much earlier. And the second thing, while working in these two very big disasters, I agree with this that designing a disaster management plan requires common sense 3 parts and education of all involved 1 part. And obviously then specialization of intervention is art and science, and which vary from person to person, group to group, and mission to mission. But one thing which is very common is in that demanding time is the common sense. Disaster in Pakistan, as I said, are of 4 types which we encounter, and I, being located in center of the country and in the largest hospital, is the first place where we receive such calls. I'm sorry, this is 2005. I have done something wrong here. It was 5th of October 2005 when severity of 7.6 Richter scale earthquake hit Pakistan at 8:52 a.m. It is in the northeast of the country, and this is the area where there is part of the Kashmir, which is with Pakistan, and the part of the Kashmir was equally affected. And on the opposite side, you see that what type of damages it brought. This Kashmir city, Muzaffarabad, is basically a valley, and as you see that what happened to the buildings. And on the left side is the chaos in which the people have been carrying their injured right on the carts and as well as on the ambulances. So these are a few pictures which show that what happened to the cities in that area, and practically in the valley, the whole cities, they were just brought to ground. And that's the area where small rivers were connected by these cable bridges, and all sort of means of communication with landslides and broken villages were dismantled, which increased the suffering for the community and increased the challenge for the volunteers. The disaster too was just last year in 2010, when after 29th July's monsoons, they continued for a long time, and they brought situation to this level that all areas, including cities and villages and industries, they were just being overrun by water. It is something which is similar to tsunami, but the situation is different because the water didn't come at that speed. So, obviously, I'm not going to give data about, but then we learn something very differentiating in all these four forms of disasters. This is a photograph which has been taken by a mobile phone camera, so the quality is not very good. But this tells very clearly that in earthquake, when the buildings they fall on the human beings, what type of injuries can they bring? If you see that this is the roof which has fallen, and these are three human beings which are pressed in between. And this is the type of injuries. You can see whole range, and amputations of all types. And this is where we learn that in this massive disaster, 2 million, more than 2 million were displaced, more than 80,000 were dead, and the body was injured in 240, 2002, we call it 240. And wounds were, just body surface wounds were 45%, and major injuries were 55%, and these were those who survived the injuries. The major injuries were limb fracture 60%, cavity injuries, abdominal chest 20%, spinal injuries 2%, and out of these 30% they turned out to be paraplegic. And head injury was 1%, and 50% of the head injuries they had a neurological impairment of some sort. And amputations, they were 0.9%. As this data is from my own two camps, Army, and this PPOS is a center in our frontier province supported by GTZ Germany and World Health Organization. This graph tells that right from onward, when we started recording the patients, and because of here you see that we in October when it happened, for a few days the injuries they were not coming so in a heavy number, but very quickly, as means of communication and transportation were increasing, their number increased. After a peak in mid-November, it fell down, and then many patients they were brought after some time. And here we have been treating the problems or complications of the patients who were treated there. One of my earlier expert has already informed you that it is very difficult to control quality when many volunteers are working in such area. And one of my Canadian colleagues those days when we were managing the camps, and volunteers from all over the world, they were coming and using our operating facilities and satisfying their mission to serve the humanity from all over the world. But my Canadian colleague, after a few days, asked me that how can you control this tendency, cut and go? They would just operate and they pack their themselves in 3 days, 4 days, and they would go. And most of the time, they wouldn't think of planning some long-term treatment. And we found that some amputations, they were not logical. Obviously, gender and the age groups, which won't be, but we know that all age groups they were, and this is the normal demography of the age groups of the population, which we found was there. So there was no discrimination. Anybody was affected by the earthquake. Whosoever was inside the houses and buildings, and whosoever was outside had a possibility to escape. Like my other colleagues, they have mentioned that most of the body of our segment injured are femur, tibia, and radius ulna, followed by a humerus and a hand. And The type of dislocations, again, our data took note of it that the major were elbow and ankle out of the dislocations. Wherever in fractures, open or compound, the long bones of lower limb, they were number one. So this is a little difference. Which part of the body had more wounds? The legs. And the foot and hand, these three body components, they had largely been the areas where body wounds they occurred. So this is something data about the implants which we have used, and obviously the fixator removals and doing some definitive surgery and nailing. External fixator were less. We use two types of fixators, so brought together they are as big as nailing. What we learned that in my hospital, we have our observation that all deaths, they always occur in first 20 minutes, and these are because of vital organ damage, and hardly we have ever been able to do something, even intensive cares. But then 30% deaths, they occur 2 to 3 hours and we blame deficient or defective treatment. Not taken care of, and 20% deaths they occur 2 and 3 weeks, and the complication that is because of the complications of the treatment, infections and others. But in this earthquake, what we learned that in other earthquake there is a pattern. That the first injury, then wound infection and disease and outbreaks of like other diseases, this is the time frame, and this is the known factor of the percentage where the deaths they take place. But in earthquake 2005, what we learned that after the first injury and death, then the graph went down like this. Coming to amputations, this is one center data. You have already read that total number of amputations which have been consolidated in the WHO registry were 888, but in the two centers which I was managing, we had only 112 amputations. And these were carried out by multiple surgeons from different countries and different organizations. Here you see that I agree to the previous data that most of the amputations, like 36 out of 112, were below knee, and above knee 24. Then elbow, toes, finger, hands and feet, and lower limbs, they are affected most. So these are a few young children having amputations. And to serve these amputees, I used 3 centers, one PPOS in Peshawar by GTZ, one Fauji Foundation in, this is Army Institution in Rawalpindi, and orthopedic workshop of prosthetics and orthotics in Mayo Hospital where I am based. We still call orthotic prosthetic workshop as orthopedic workshop. Traditionally it was created part of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery, so we are still managing it. And now we are running a 4-year BSc training program in orthotics and prosthetic manufacturing. So the rehabilitation, and we had some good colleagues who have been taking care of the rehabilitation part. I'll show you some parts of the next disaster, which is the flood. And here I would only tell you that we were able to manage volunteer days of 2,577. Where these volunteers, they worked in this group, and we were able to treat 37,000 patients, 48,000 animals, and 3,000 dental problems. And here the disease profile was altogether different. Some people died, so that they were dead, and those who did not, they suffered other diseases like chest infection, diarrhea, dehydration, fever, and other problems. But I'll just show that our first aim in this area was when the people, they were just displaced from their houses. To all those displaced, they need food. So we took everything, and cooking and providing them food was the first thing. Second thing was giving them medicine. And you see that on motorbikes, walking in water, and on cycles. You see here the volunteers there on the bicycles, going from village to village on the boat bridges. And you see sometimes in the villages, then you just have to create such dispensaries and dispense the medicine. Then the second thing was distributing the relief goods, and they were like this, that collect the relief goods worth millions and then pack them and distribute them on boats and reach to these villages and cluster houses which are already disconnected from the main population. And there was the much area was washed away, and we selected 100 square kilometer on the river Indus bank, right in the middle of the country, and that was the area which was most adversely affected. And we took out of our own resources. We thought that we will do some rehabilitation work as well, and this is. The same washed away the village was from the Google map, and this is what has been already constructed, and for the last 3 months the people are living in this village. The flood has given them better houses now, a better village, but then they have lost so much of their own. If we tell you that the age pattern, and you will see that in this area, the most of this age, men 50 to 60, they were in their work outside their villages in this area. And when we calculated in that 100 square kilometer, then the animal death toll was high, followed by human life and then by the poultry life. Since I was working in a multidisciplinary group this time, and 16 universities, they had joined hand, and I was coordinating all of them, and also performing fundraising for the whole project. So we all professionals, they were working together in one group. So these are certain impacts, and you see the impact on economy, and where the red line is before the flood and after the flood of population. But then at the end of the day, spending about 16 million plus 16.5 million, we were able to raise that village. And plus, which is not counted, is 2,575 work days, supervisory and advisory volunteers, and discount on several purchases, which was almost more than 20%, because everyone was emotionally moved and they wanted to help us. But at this time, we were more organized than the earthquake, and we had a group of arts and drama students from 11 universities, which also served these depressed population and volunteers, and created life in this rehabilitation. So these were the universities, all the vice-chancellors, they formally came on board as the executive board, and they would navigate and we would perform work in this 100 square kilometer area. I'm sorry. So that's all. Thank you very much.
To speak about rehabilitation.